Hello, this is Don Hall. This is at Don Hall Works YouTube channel, and I am at Sierra High School in Manteca, California. Kira Eadington, and she has a really great technique where she makes bowls with her students like these and does not use the potter's wheel. So let's let her tell us about it.
All right, yeah, so you can see we do it with a slump mold, and we use a slab and we add a foot ring on. You can extrude it or you can just roll out a coil, but it goes pretty quick. We get bowls done in 1 period. I'm gonna show you how to roll out a slab using a rolling pin, a couple of slabbing sticks, or you can use paint sticks from the hardware store, and some canvas. So I already have my clay. So first off, when I show my students how to do this, like if I just kind of, that's doing too much, okay? Like that's gonna take forever and it tends to make noise. But what I'll do is I'll have them push the clay down a little bit flatter, but not like crazy flat. You wanna, you don't wanna smear it. You just wanna flatten it a little bit. Then make sure your sticks are about 1 inch or pretty close to the edge of your clay. And your rolling pin should always stay balanced on the sticks. If it's not balanced on the sticks, your slab's gonna be uneven. This is the easiest way to keep it even. So for me personally, and for a lot of my students who are on the smaller side, if they try to use the handles, they're just using their wrist power, which is not that much. But if you put your hands on top and it's close to you, you can put your body weight on it and it goes a little quicker. So I start in the middle, I roll halfway, I flip it and do the same thing. So depending on what shape you're going for, like are you making a bowl, are you making a cup, what shape do you need? That's kind of how I rotate it. But I flip it frequently because it releases the clay from the canvas. And when the clay gets real wet and it sticks to the canvas, it takes more work to get it all the way flat. So you're gonna continue rolling. Since I'm making a bowl, since it's starting to get wider, I'm gonna start doing like a quarter turn to keep it as round as possible, and make sure that the canvas doesn't have any wrinkles in it. That's gonna give it like weak spots if it's got wrinkles. So I'm gonna do a little bit that way, quarter turn. The more often you flip this, the easier and actually quicker it goes. Like a lot of times my students will want to start over here and roll all the way across, but then you have to move all the clay the entire way. Whereas if you start in the middle, you're only moving half the clay, half as far, and I don't like doing extra work. So, you know, I'm not gonna. All right, so I'm getting close, but I'm not flat yet. As your slab gets bigger, because like this is a really big slab, you want to be real careful in how you hold it. And you'll know you're done when you very first flip it over and it doesn't move at all. So I've still got a little bit to go. What I mean by holding the slab carefully is you want to use your full hand like this when picking it up and not just the edge. If you just hold the edge, the slab's heavy and it'll pull off. So if you watch this edge right here, see how it just moved? It's not quite done yet, but it's almost done. And always check and make sure you don't have any wrinkles. Okay, so I think I need one more flip, and then let's check and see if it's done. It didn't move, so we're good. All right, so I'm gonna show you how to take this flat slab and make it into a bowl-like form using this slump mold. So this is a mold that I made out of plaster, and we're gonna make a bowl. It's gonna be amazing. So I've got my slab already rolled out. I'm gonna carefully set it on top of the mold. I do have my mold on a banding wheel. That helps make it be able to spin. You want to try to get this as centered as possible, and if it doesn't quite go all the way to the bottom, that's okay because we're going to trim it. So once you have it set on there, we're going to flatten it a little bit on the bottom to make it match the mold. And then I always explain to my students, we're gonna pat our bellies. Like, this is a big old belly right here, and we're gonna pat our bellies just because we're always gonna work on the far side. And I do stand while I do this just so I can get a good view of what I'm doing. So that way when I'm walking around the classroom, I can just be like, okay, don't forget to pat your belly. And then they're like, oh yeah. Because this motion is way easier than this motion. This motion can get really uncomfortable. So once I have this part flat, I'm gonna do a little ring where I'm just using my fingers to just kind of gently push the slab so it matches all the way around up against the mold. And I'm gonna do that probably like 2 or 3 times, and I'm gonna go a little bit lower each time. If I'm getting a big fold, I can kind of unfold the fold a little bit. I don't want to pull it off, I just want to unfold it. And we do that for a bit. Okay. So once we get down and these are starting to get a little bit more foldy, that's when I changed my technique. Instead of just pushing with my fingers, I'm gonna end up compressing with 2 hands. So like this part right here is very like steep. So I'm gonna stick my fingers underneath the slab to support, and I'm gonna use my thumbs to push down. And I'm just making this slightly wider, and then still pat my belly. I'm gonna compress. Okay, so I'm just kind of like, I like to think of it where I'm making the slab a little bit thicker there because I'm kind of squeezing the clay in. And I'm just gonna go around little bits at a time, and I'm gonna compress, and I'm gonna compress, and I'm gonna compress. I'll open it up, so hold it with my fingers and just kind of use my thumbs to press it down. Compress, compress, compress. And I'm always gonna work on the far side. So I keep doing that until I get as far as I can go on my mold. So for my students, it just really depends on, or for me really, it just depends on how big of a slab I have. Sometimes I have extra that drapes off the side, and sometimes I have like a gap, and that's okay because we're gonna trim off anything funky right at the end. And one thing that my students have happen sometimes, or I have happen, that makes them nervous is like if they're compressing on this side, sometimes this side will pop up. Just trust the process, keep on going. And you're gonna go down as far as you can.
Kira has over 300 how-to ceramic videos on her YouTube channel. Check them out at Kira Eadington.
So once I get to the very bottom, I'm still gonna compress, but I'm just gonna let all this junk hang off the side. And I'm just gonna make sure that my clay matches my slump mold all the way down. And the thing you're trying to avoid is really big wrinkles. Like this one right here is fairly small and it doesn't go up very high on the mold, so I'm just gonna trim that off. It's not a big deal. But if I had like a really big fold, that would make a weak spot in my bowl. Okay, so once I've got it all the way down to the bottom, I'm gonna support the clay so I don't pull it off, but I'm gonna trim off the extra. I'm just gonna use the banding wheel action to be able to rotate it, and I'm just cutting it the same as the mold. So that way when I go to trim this evenly, I can have my finger run underneath here to help me keep it straight. I want to make sure that we're trimming off anything that's funky, and if there's any funky bits on the mold, we're going to trim above that too. So to make sure that the line is nice and even, we need to be able to hold our hand real rigid. And for me to do that, I'm going to tuck in my elbow, and I'm going to put my pinky underneath the mold, and I'm just gonna hold this position. And all I'm gonna be doing is turning the mold, okay? When I go through this, I wanna make sure that it's matched before I actually cut it. So I'm just gonna spin the mold and lightly trace the line, and I'm gonna make sure that I match back up and that I have cut off any real funky bits with the line that I've chosen. Now, I'm not gonna like stab it and pull it. If I do that, I'll mess up my mold and it messes up the lip. So I'm gonna lay my needle tool pretty flat against the surface, and I'm just gonna continue along this line, and I'm gonna cut deeper and deeper each time I rotate until I get all the way through. Once you cut all the way through, you're gonna be able to feel that it'll feel different, kind of like touching the mold than it will doing the clay. So once you've gone all the way around, you can cut down, and then that piece comes off, and now you got a really, you know, even edge. The last bit of this is you don't want to flatten this edge up against the mold. It makes it harder to pull off later. But if you real baby soft, smooth this edge. We already made a bowl, and now I'm gonna show you how to attach the foot and make sure it's nice and flat. So when you flip it over, it'll be flat on the table. Okay, so I make a basic coil, and then I kind of pre-smooth it a little bit so it's less time on this part of the mold, and that way I can do it the day before. So I'll kind of set it up close to what I think I'm gonna need, and then I am gonna trim it, take off the extra pieces, and then I'm not gonna attach this yet because I'm not 100% sure that it's the perfect size, but I am gonna pre-smooth it. So I'll put my fingers on the outside of the coil and just gently push down. And it's important that you do the outside of the coil and not the top. If you do the top of the coil and your fingers are too close together, you end up with something that looks like that, and that's not what we're going for. So make sure your fingers are out on the outside edge, and I'm gonna pre-smooth all the way around. Now, once I've done that, I have a couple different options. If I want to make a full foot ring like I'm going to do now, then I'm going to make a full foot ring. If I want to make a shorter foot ring, then I could use a template and kind of figure out where I want things on the template, but we're going to do a full one. So once you have your foot ring kind of pre-smoothed, then I look at the molded bowl, and I want to look for the transition from where it's flat to where it falls off on a curve. And I want to put my foot ring right at the outside edge of the flat area. So I want the thickest part of my foot ring right at that edge. So now that I've got it kind of pre-smoothed, I'm going to set this on here. And in general, like if you're real close to something, sometimes it's hard to see what you're actually doing. So I'll step back and I will kind of look at it from different angles and make sure that it's actually centered on my thing. Because the last thing you want is your foot like all the way off to the side. That doesn't work. So once I've decided that for sure it's in the center, I'm gonna cut off any extra, and that's when I'm gonna start scoring and slipping. Now we're doing a molded bowl, and like for my students, we have to get these suckers off of the mold before the end of the period. So like they still use their magic water, but we don't want it like super crazy wet. We just want it a little bit wet. But we're gonna score bigger than we think we need, because if we scored correctly, when we go to smooth it, it'll auto smooth itself. So I'm gonna score on the bowl, and then I'm gonna score on the foot. And you want to make sure you go all the way edge to edge with your scoring. Like you don't want to give your stuff any, like you don't want to give it an area where it's not attached well. And then we use magic water. If you start to get like a big drip, just wipe it back up. But we just dip and drip in class. I always tell them they're going to slip it like a dewdrop fairy, because the dewdrop fairy is going to go around going ping, ping on the flowers. All right, so now I've got that. Make sure it's nice and centered again. Just a little bit more right there. Okay. All right, so now I want to make sure this is stuck real good. So I'm going to kind of push it down, and then this is the only time that I smooth down. The rest of the time I'm doing a molded bowl, I always smooth up, but right here I'm going to smooth down just a little bit. And if my finger gets wet, I'm wearing an apron, and I'll just wipe it off, like any water off on my apron. Because like if you leave the water on your finger, it gets too slick, and then you can't blend as easily. My students would make fun of me right now because I'm wiping it on the table, and they'd be like, "Ooh, Mizzy, you're gonna have some cleanup to do." They're right. And I go all the way around the outside, and then I'll do the inside as well. I'm almost there. Okay, so now for the inside, I usually support from the outside, and it's just kind of the opposite, where I'm just kind of like smoothing on the inside. So you would just smooth all the way around on the inside. And then the last step for like adding the foot on is making sure that it's nice and even. So I know I haven't done the inside yet, but pretend I did. Then I'm gonna lay this on here. I'm just gonna gently kind of push it, because as you're smoothing, you're gonna end up adding in like some little wrinkles and stuff. So I'm just making sure there's a nice flat area right here. So once you have that and you've added your name on the bottom, if that's what you do, then it's time to pull this off. You don't want this to stay on too long, because if it gets too dry, it'll literally crack off the mold. So when we go to take these off, the motion that we're going for is we're trying to pull it up and towards the center. We don't want to pull it out. If we pull it out, we're going to break it. But if we pull it up and towards the center, and we're real gentle about it, so I kind of support at the top, and I just go around and I'll start pulling towards the middle, and I'll just do a little bit at a time. And at a certain point, you'll see it like kind of pop off the mold a little bit. You'll start to feel it release. So, oh, there, it started to release right there, because I could feel, oh, did you see it kind of move a little bit? So once you've pulled it and you can feel that it's gonna move, then you flip it over. And now you can smooth it, and you've got a beautiful bowl. So a couple tips and tricks that I've learned over the years with my students. One thing, when you're smoothing this, always smooth up on this. If there's a weak spot in your mold or in your slab and you blend down, it tends to tear. Or if there's a heavy part of your slab, it can tear. So always kind of smooth up. Another thing, if you're trying to keep it real nice and round, how you pick it up is really important. So you want to leave this on the mold till it feels leather hard, but before it cracks. But when you pick it up, always try to pick it up from the bottom, and so that way it holds its shape. A lot of times my students want to pick it up like this and move it, or they want to pick it up at the rim and move it. And if you squish it and try to pull it back, it'll show up in the firing, because clay has a memory. So you always want to hold it from the bottom.